It's a little smaller than Helen's, but size doesn't determine everything. Baby, you smell so good, Perseus said again, in a very confused voice. Are you really that interested in this kind of thing? She asked, her tone still indifferent. Of course, he's a boy, and boys are children too. You felt the same way about Helene? No, the relationship between her and me is not what you see. Whatever. You're not going to tell me anyway. Why are you talking like that? All wronged. Do you know how much it hurts people to hear that? Snort. So cute. Perseus chuckled softly. Don't say such nonsensical things. What's so strange about it? I'm just seriously praising you. Snort. Perseus's breathing became somewhat rapid. What are you doing? Ivisa's voice was even colder. Baby, I promise I'll be good to you. You were the one who couldn't sleep, but now you've made me unable to sleep too. So, can you make it up to me? Isn't this considered compensation? Not enough. Then what else do you want? I think people are just too embarrassed to say it. It's unbelievable that you can say such things while you're messing around with other people's bodies. But I promise we'll all be able to fall asleep in a little while. So, turn around first, and then we can discuss it slowly. After a moment of silence, Ivisa turned around and looked at him coldly. Even as Perseus unbuttoned her shirt, her cool gaze remained unmoved. Mom, Perseus said softly. Ivisa gave a soft snort, frowned in annoyance, and closed her eyes. Helen opened her eyes in the darkness. It was almost time. She needed to go next door to deliver the reward she had promised her boyfriend during the day. However, when she sneaked out in the dark and gently opened the door, the scene she saw was unforgettable for the rest of her life. Could it be that? It can't be. Is it really true? Pooh. Shameless. The Midori storyline, right? Helen quietly closed the door again, her heart pounding wildly, her face flushing and paling by turns. Although she wore a smile, the cold light in her eyes was extremely sharp. The two people inside knew she was coming, but neither of them intended to stop. In the final moment, Perseus moved his face up and kissed her lips. In the ensuing silence, the only chirping of insects suddenly fell silent. Chapter 66 News of the Conferment of a Nobility. In the middle of the night, Helen still quietly slipped into that quiet room and lay down on the other side of Perseus. But as soon as she got into bed, Ivisa discovered her. Helen didn't know if the woman hadn't slept at all or had suddenly woken up. In any case, she opened her eyes instantly without any warning, almost startling Helen. At this time, the moonlight had already passed through the window, but a little bit of light still shone in. Before her eyes, Ivisa's face was even brighter than the moonlight, and even she was somewhat intoxicated by it. Her boyfriend, Perseus, had his face buried deep in the woman's chest, with her holding his head, and who knows what sweet dreams he was having. With one head no longer obstructing the view, even though Perseus was lying between the two, it didn't prevent them from silently gazing at each other. One smiling face, one cold face, neither of them spoke. The atmosphere was strange and subtle, and even Helen found it particularly novel and quite fun. After a while, Ivisa closed her eyes again. Helen felt ignored and was annoyed, so she decided to play a prank. She gradually removed all her clothes, pressed herself against Perseus's back from behind, and stared at Ivisa at close range, with only a head's distance between them. The long, quiet night passed just like that. When Perseus woke up in the early morning, he had just opened his eyes when he heard a cold voice. Let go. So he obediently gave in. Ivisa covered herself with her hand, got up, turned her back to him, dressed, and left the room without saying a word. Perseus was still dazed and confused when his body was flipped 180 degrees by a force from behind, and his mouth was precisely sealed shut. The texture has changed. He was now fully awake, and his gaze cautiously moved upward, meeting a kind and beautiful smiling face. Ah, another mother. Hee. You really know how to enjoy yourself. No wonder you've completely forgotten about your real girlfriend. Helen laughed, her eyes narrowing into slits. Perseus was helpless. No matter how eloquent he was, he could not utter a single word now. No need to explain. First make up for what you owed last night, and I might consider being lenient with you. Helen closed her eyes and couldn't help but hum softly. The breakfast table was set with bread and milk, which is very much in line with human eating habits. It was obviously prepared on purpose, and it seems that my father-in-law really put a lot of thought into entertaining his guests. Perseus, did you sleep well last night? Luna's breakfast was still meat, and she asked happily as she ate. Perseus glanced at Ivisa, who was ignoring him, and then at Helen, who was watching him with great interest. How to choose his words became a problem that troubled him. If she wanted to praise someone to the fullest extent, Helene would definitely seize the opportunity to elaborate. He wanted to brush it off, but was afraid Ivy would get upset, so he forced her to break the engagement. I slept very well last night and this morning. After taking a big gulp of milk, Perseus flashed a very handsome smile. That's great. I was worried you wouldn't be used to living here. You should come to my house often. Luna's face beamed with joy. Don't worry, it definitely will. It's a pity he couldn't reciprocate by inviting Luna to stay at his apartment for a few days. That would have been incredibly impolite. After breakfast, the group boarded the carriage to the academy. When they arrived at the classroom, Miri Farah was somewhat surprised to see the four of them enter at the same time. What a coincidence. We just happened to run into each other outside. She was speaking to Perseus. Because of these people, Perseus was the only one she was willing to talk to and could actually engage in conversation with. Unexpectedly, Luna answered very quickly this time. They all stayed at my house last night. Of course they come to school together. Oh, I see. You refused their invitation. Mellifera pouted slightly. Luna was even more pleased with herself. Perseus sighed helplessly. Did the princess really have to use such a resentful tone? It was so easy for people to misunderstand. Who says otherwise? I never expected that Princess Mellifera and I would have so much in common on this topic, Helen said in a good mood. Mellifera smiled and looked out the window. There was nothing there but clouds, but she appreciated it all. Helen was in a bad mood, but her smile became even more beautiful. This is how the two of them interact. Perseus is used to it. Classes haven't started yet, but the students seem unusually enthusiastic about chatting today, as if they're discussing something they value highly. And while they were discussing, they would secretly glance at Perseus. It wasn't that she was looking at him, but rather at Luna, who was smiling broadly in his arms. What happened? Perseus asked Helen. Oh, so now you remember me. Helene said expressionlessly. Perseus had no choice but to put Luna on the table for the time being, and then hooked his arm around Helen's neck and gave her a passionate kiss. Shall we talk in detail on the rooftop? Perseus smiled afterward. No need, it's common knowledge. The news was only released yesterday, so it's normal that you don't know. Helen licked her lips. This really hit Perseus where it hurt. He didn't have a wide social circle, and his intelligence was often delayed, which was the exact opposite of Helene. His girlfriend is indeed very resourceful and has many informants, but she cannot be completely used by him. This pain point must be addressed as soon as possible. What is it? Perseus asked. Lord Kutu, you are about to be granted a title. So that's how it is. Kutu had made outstanding contributions, so the emperor naturally had to bestow generous rewards and commendations upon him. The greatest achievement in destroying a nation naturally belongs to the duke, who will replace the recently extinct Ephraim family as one of the new 5 dukes. This Imperial Magic Academy was originally set up specifically for the children of nobles. Commoners, no matter how outstanding their talent, were not eligible for admission. Allowing Luna, who has little magical talent, to enter the academy is a very clear signal. Perseus looked at Luna. Luna didn't have a particularly strong reaction. She didn't know the meaning of duke or understand what kind of honor it represented. But even if she did, she probably wouldn't care. In her eyes, her father was the most powerful, and it was not his honor, but the emperor's, to be granted a title. The granting of titles to demi-humans was not unprecedented in the empire, but previously, the titles granted were either barons or viscounts, with not even earls. To directly bestow a duke title is truly earth-shattering news. No wonder these guys are so excited. This means that a new power structure will emerge in the imperial sphere, and a luxurious ship that everyone would flock to will be launched, sets sail, and awaits its vacancy. However, the fact that the new duke was a demi-human made them both excited and hesitant. Would humans be allowed to board the demi-human ship? Some people were eager to know the answer, so Perseus was approached again. The person who was looking for him was a duke's daughter. Chapter 67 Katie. The Sharinria Empire was founded with 8 dukes, and over the next 200 years, 10 more people were granted the title of duke, for a total of 18. However, only 4 people still stand at the pinnacle of the empire. The remaining 14, for various reasons, either lost power and declined or had their bloodlines cut off. The Sphenic family belongs to the former category, and they are notoriously unlucky. About 50 years ago, some nobles of the empire, dissatisfied with the policies promulgated by the emperor, gathered together to rebel against the emperor's rule, and thus a civil war broke out. The rebels were mostly minor nobles with low ranks, who only managed to stir up some trouble in the early stages because they held some real power. In order to gain support, they sent envoys to persuade the Grand Dukes. The dukes, being powerful and intelligent, would never associate with such desperados. So they all went to the palace to see the emperor and voluntarily explain the situation. The Duke of Sfnig thought the same thing back then, but he was not in the capital at the time. On his way back, he was unfortunately intercepted by the rebels and was taken prisoner for a while. Despite the duke's unwavering resistance, the rebels, operating under the banner of the Sfnig family, conquered cities and territories, achieving considerable victories. After the civil war was quelled, the duke regained his freedom. In his rage, the emperor, despite his keen insight in determining that the duke had not colluded with the rebels, still pinned all the blame on the duke. All family members, including the duke himself, were stripped of their official positions, and all their property was confiscated for post-war reconstruction. The once powerful Sfnig family was reduced to nothing more than the title of duke overnight. Even worse off than the Perseus family. At least their family still has more than half a village's worth of fiefdom land left. The Sfenigs lost everything, and the duke himself died of anger. With the tree fallen, the monkeys scattered, and the collateral branches went their separate ways. Although the duke's direct descendants are still dukes, they are a joke compared to the dukes of Lovia and Helen's families. The Duchess Katie Svannig, who approached Perseus this time, is the current Duke of Svannig, whose father is said to be a tailor. It was a job that was considered quite lowly by the children of noble families. Perseus and Katie were classmates, but they never spoke a word to each other. According to his observation, Katie never spoke a word to anyone and always kept to herself, but during the early part of the semester, she was always surrounded by a large group of idle people. Because of her status as Duchess of Sfnig, Sfingus had long been synonymous with misfortune in the empire, which was quite amusing. The fact that his descendants were reduced to mending clothes for ordinary people was even more laughable. At the Imperial Magic Academy, being unknown isn't always a bad thing. For someone as famous as Katie, but without a powerful family, life is much harder than being invisible. However, Katie never paid any attention to their sarcasm and always focused on her own affairs. Perseus admired her character, but he appreciated Katie's beauty even more. Admittedly, although she was exceptionally beautiful, this did not bring her any preferential treatment. On the contrary, it made her the focus of those with ill intentions. Perseus's vision was quite good. Real. Rooftop, it's rooftop again. Miss Katie, may I ask what brings you here? Perseus smiled. According to custom, he should address her as Duchess Sfnig, but he was afraid that she would misunderstand it as a form of mockery. When those idle people mocked her, they called her Duke in a flippant and contemptuous tone, as if they were calling out the name of a prostitute. Are you very familiar with that, Miss Luna? Katie's expression was indifferent, and her voice was cold and hoarse, as if she was not used to speaking. That depends on how you interpret it. Stop talking nonsense. I'm here to ask you to introduce me to her father. Perseus wasn't the type to fawn over the powerful and belittle the weak, but he did believe that when someone is in a lower position, they should maintain humility, as this is good for both themselves and others. Therefore, he did not particularly appreciate the Duchess of Sfnig's attitude of asking for favors. Let's forgive her for being looked down upon since childhood, having no friends, and not being very good at interpersonal relationships. Thinking about this, he felt a sense of shared misfortune with the other person. I think I understand what you mean, but I'd like to ask your purpose first, Perseus emphasized. This is a question that must be answered, and if you don't cooperate, I will be unable to provide you with any assistance. Katie hesitated for a moment, then said, I want to join the army. Joining the army was a good way to get ahead in the empire, and many nobles rose to prominence through war, whether it's external or internal. Yes, I'll join the army. Perseus nodded with a smile. But I don't want to start from the bottom. It's not that I want to take a shortcut, but I'm worried that if I only stay as a soldier, I will not only not get the opportunity to show my abilities, but my achievements will also be taken away or buried by others, and I will not get the promotion I deserve. It might be normal for someone else to steal credit in other countries, but it's absolutely impossible in an empire.